Okay, ready or not, here we go. Another live stream here with Jungle Jargon. Jargon is my name, Jungle, because I came from the jungles and I have jargons. Anyway, I just wanted to do like a little live stream about some of the comments that I have. Of course, everybody already knows what kind of responses we get from people. But this one is, pretty good conversation here. Of course, they don't ever want to, come live, show their face or anything because they're embarrassed of their face or something. Especially if they're somebody somewhere belonging somewhere to somebody or something. They don't want to show their face, of course, because they might embarrass themselves or embarrass whoever they work for and all that kind of stuff, which is understandable. We can accept that. We can understand that. At any rate, this guy here is an intelligent guy, seems to be intelligent, and only he's very, very miseducated, misinformed, and has no idea because nobody ever told him anything, much of anything. So he's thinking that I don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm trying to best answer his questions. He says he doesn't have questions, but he's got a lot of questions about what I think and believe, obviously, because it keeps coming back with more and more responses, which are totally unfounded. But anyways, of course, it's the way it always is. So let's, without dragging along too much, let's go ahead and add the discussion to the page here. Put myself right over here. And hopefully my hydroponics doesn't make too much noise or whatever. So, where are we going? Oh, we're going over here. Okay, we got this there. Okay, we got this here. Let's go over here. But what we have to do, what I have to do is kind of zoom in a little bit here. Where am I? Well, come on. What's wrong with this thing? Don't tell me my computer is going to act up. Where is this thing here? Let me go back out. I guess go back out. I'll just go zoom in like this. What was that? And I have it here like this. Okay, there we go. All right. All right. Like I said, this guy here has a lot of responses and everything. But I just gave him a response, a very lengthy response. Most of my responses are very short, but this one happens to be a very long one. This is his handle here, Ruhr, 1984. So I'm telling him he's got to catch up on a little history. So let's see what he's got going here. I don't know if we can, well, the discussion is very long, so we really can't go through the whole thing. But just to get an idea of what his response is like, he's responding to Jungle Jargon here. It's honestly amazing to be accused of making up history or having denial issues by someone who is actively rewriting the historical timeline to fit a 5,000-year narrative. Well, we know the calendars are 5,000 years old already, so we're just going by the known historical timeline, not making up anything. Then he says, let's look at the actual facts. You're dodging. Okay, I'm not dodging anything because, is yet to show me something very significant. So, firstly, you're completely moving the goalposts, which they always say, but you got to explain everything. Then try and explain everything. They say you're moving the goalpost. In your last comment, you claimed Samaria came from Sargon. Of course, if you knew anything about Sargon, you would know that Sargon literally made Samaria. He was the king of Samaria, if you knew anything about it or whatever. Now you're acknowledging Abraham was from the Sumerian city. Well, he was, which means Samaria obviously had to exist long before Sargon. No, because Sargon, which I'm going to explain to him, Sargon literally built Samaria in Akkad. Akkad is Akkadian, which is the descendants of Sargon. The Akkadians are descendants of Sargon and Abraham. Okay, furthermore, conflating Sargon of Akkad, who is a historically documented king who spoke Semitic language, not a Cush. Right, he didn't go to Africa. That's why he doesn't speak the language of African language, because he's not in Africa. He's in Sumer or Assyria and Akkad. He speaks Akkadian, and they say it's Semitic. Well, it's just the language of the area. Come on. Anyways, okay. Not a Cushitic one, but you got to explain simple things to these people. With Nimrod is just fan fiction, of which I'm going to explain. I'm going to show it's not just fan fiction. You're arbitrary slapping biblical names onto real historical figures with zero archaeological or historical evidence to back it up. Lie, because I got both genetic, historic, and the archaeological is his features and the features of his descendants, which we can get into. So it might be a little, little controversial, but it is what it is. He's a descendant of Ham. He's Cushite. His descendants are Cushite in Sumer, and they're the ruling class because he's the king of the world. Because he was probably very large person. Might call him a giant, but he was a very large person, very significant person, as we should already know. Second, climbing down out of the trees to build megaliths, because I asked him, I said, what do you think? People climbed out of trees and began building megaliths? It's a massive straw man. No, it's not. You literally think that we climbed down out of the trees and started building megaliths. The first thing we ever did was to build megaliths and start writing, And you think that there's no record from before the time we started building megaliths? There's no record of humans? Oh, we just all of a sudden started building megaliths and writing things down. Come on. Use your head. You're given a mind, use it. No archaeologist or evolutionary biologist claims that. Well, they would be embarrassed to claim it, but that's what they believe, basically. There is a continuous, physically documented transmission spanning tens of thousands. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. No, there isn't, because you're assuming dates. You're projecting dates onto tools and megaliths and stuff like that, and you're assuming days. Okay, here's a good one. Natufian culture. Everybody talks about Natufian culture, but it's Canaanite or whatever culture. And then the megaliths, or whatever it was, Tyre, Sidon, whatever, in the area, somewhere in that areas. And you still haven't addressed the geological fact that sites like Göbekli Tepe are carved directly out of solid limestone bedrock, not sitting on top of flood sediments. Well, it is. Limestone bedrock is sedimentary deposit. Whether you realize it, wanted to know it or not, it is. And who knows how soft it was. It might have been a lot softer when they did it. And it turned into stone. Because I'm thinking, all the megaliths in Peru, the Inca stones, how did they make those stones? There's probably soft sediment or soft material that was hardening, and they used it knowing that it would harden into rock shortly, and that's what they built on, with these huge bags of sediment that they put together, and they sat on top of each other, so they fit perfectly together, and they hardened into rock. Not complicated, right? Which is something you can't do today, obviously. But they did do it back then, and they carved it. They carved the structure, and then it hardened into stone, or it was already hardening, or whatever. Okay, and another thing about Göbekli Tepe, of course, is the emaciated figures in vultures. Now, what would you expect to see from the time people get off the ark? You'd expect to see emaciated animals and a lot of vultures, right? Okay. So it's attesting to the time of the global flood, or right after the global flood. A single chaotic flood does not neatly sort millions of years of fossils into distinct, predictable geological strata all over the world. Yes, it does, because that's what we see. I mean, it's all water deposited sediments all over the world. I asked him how much. He didn't say, what the volume of the water deposited sediment layers are from the flood that turned into bedrock. Finally, your response to nihilase bacteria is just brushing away hard evidence. Well, it's a part of the genome to adapt and to break down carbon molecules, and it's a synthetic polymer, just like everything else is carbon. It did not exist. It exists in other forms. All you got to do is alter your strategy a little bit from an existing mechanism, and you got the fix. You can break it down, which is the job of the bacteria. The bacteria wouldn't be useful if it didn't break stuff down. It's supposed to break everything down. It did not already do this. Frameshift mutation, literal observable mistake. Well, frameshift mutation. But it's a tribute to the existing genome. You can't use what is already part of the genome and claim its evolution. Every variation, even the mutations are an attribute of the existing genome. Physically altered DNA to create an entirely new enzyme with a brand new function. Well, not so brand new, of course, because all it did is make a little alteration so that it could break down this other polymer, this other synthetic polymer. Well, synthetic means man-made, but it's still carbon polymer, but bacteria is supposed to break it all down anyway. So it's doing what it's supposed to do anyway. That is the exact definition of a new genetic instruction. No, it's altering of existing function. And as for orphan genes, genetics already knows how they form. No, they don't, because there's nothing precursor or pre-existing in any other organism. That's why they gave the acronym of orphan gene, because there's nothing before it. They just suddenly appear in each and every distinct kind of animal. So if you want to know the definition of a kind, there it is right there. The orphan genes will define each and every different kind, because there's nothing like it in any other kind of animal. And geneticists already know nothing, all that stuff, and arising de novo. Nah, it doesn't arise de novo. It's alters existing information. The mechanism is from the existing genome. Okay. Telling someone to learn ancient history while you're actively ignoring physical bedrock, unbroken tree ring genealogies, and actual ancient Sumerian documents is unbelievable. History isn't a puzzle. Yeah, history is a puzzle. Well, all you gotta do is just connect the dots, where you just smash the pieces with a hammer. No, you don't smash it. You just connect the dots. All you got to do. Preferred timeline. No, you can't change the timeline, the existing timeline. There is one timeline already there, according to genealogies, calendars, and historical records. You have all these original ancient civilizations just suddenly appear, and wouldn't you know, the Bible outlines every original ancient civilization before they became a civilization, because it names each and every individual that is the progenitor of every original ancient civilization in existence. And there is no other history. So this is what I tell them. Of course, I'm responding on my phone, so I'm not really seeing. His entire response, so sometimes I don't respond to everything. But anyways, saying you need to catch up on a little history. So I gave him a little history lesson here. Cush fathered Nimrod. He became a mighty one on earth. He was mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And then in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. We know about Babel. Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar, Mesopotamia. From that land he went to Assyria, built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Kala, and Resen between Nineveh and Kala. Okay, so he literally built Sumer. If you want to know who built Sumer, it was Nimrod who built Sumer. So I'm trying to explain to him, this. Okay, then it goes on to say, Mitzrayim fathered Ludim, Ananim, Lehabim, Naphthalim, Pashulim, Kashulim, from whom came the Philistines. So if you want to know where the Philistines came from, there it is right there. Kashulim, descendant of Mitzrayim. So, which Y haplogroup do the Philistines have originally? E. It's probably E123. I mean M123 or something like that, which is Mitzrayim, descendant of Mitzrayim. Okay, Copterin. Okay, then we got Nimrod, Sargon, literally built Sumer. His descendants were the ruling class of Assyria and ancient Persia. So if you look at Assyrian petroglyphs or pictoglyphs or whatever they are, you'll see the descendants that are the ruling class of Nimrod, Sargon of Akkad, the son of Cush. You'll see them both in Sumer or Mesopotamia, and you'll see them in Persia as well. His same descendants of Nimrod, who are actually Cushites in Mesopotamia. But the rest of the Cushites, of course, went to Africa. Only the descendants of Nimrod remained in Mesopotamia, which is the reason for the C haplogroup, which splits from the B haplogroup. It's very, very clear in the genetic haplogroups, the genetic distance, when you look at the genetic distance of the Simmons Genome Project. So There are no similar supposed precursors or forerunners of ORFan genes, hence the acronym ORFan gene. So it's specific gene for a specific kind of animal. People want to know, what's a kind? How do you define a kind? You can't define a kind. There's the definition right there. Check out the ORFan genes of each and every different kind, and you'll be able to identify which kinds have that same ORFan gene. You'll know which kind is which is an original kind, and which is not of that kind. It's not complicated, right? We have science now to show us everything. Limestone is a sediment layer of the global flood. The sites are built on top of the sediment layers from the global flood. You were unable to tell me the worldwide volume of water deposited sediment layers. You should know that certain mutations are part of the design for the purpose remaining functional, viable, okay, and useful, which is to the credit of the already existing design. So stop trying to appropriate what is to the credit of the given design. Mistakes cannot build design. You cannot account for all the corrective mechanisms by making mistakes because they require foresight. Now, we're going to see just how much foresight here is required. So let's just go ahead here. Key DNA repair mechanisms. Just to get an idea of what's going on inside the cell, inside the nuclear DNA nucleus of the cell and outside. Well, what goes on outside is a result of what happens inside. Anyway, cells employ several specialized pathways to address different types of damage. Okay, we're talking about repair mechanisms. These systems operate continuously scanning the genome and activating upon detection. Proteins and enzymes play central roles in identifying issues, removing faulty sections, and restoring the original sequence. 1. Base excision repair, BER, targets small, non-bulky alterations like oxidized or deanimated bases. Okay, so there's not working. The process is a glycolysis enzyme recognizing the damaged base and removes it, creating an abasic site, a gap without a base. Then the endonuclease cuts the DNA backbone. A polymerase fills in the correct base using the complementary strand as a template. That's the other side of the DNA. And a ligase seals the strand. This is one of the most active pathways, handling thousands of lesions per cell daily. So this happens within hours, minutes and hours. Okay, he's healing thousands of cells. Okay, nucleotide excision repair, NER, fixes larger helix distorting damages, such as UV-induced thymine dimmers or chemical adducts. Okay, process damage is detected by proteins that scan for distortions. A segment of about 25 to 30 nucleotides around the lesion is excised by endonucleases. The gap is filled by DNA polymerase, again using intact strand as a guide. The intact strand as a guide. So the reason for multiple copies of information is for the purpose of making repairs. Okay, and ligase joins the ends. NER is crucial in skin cells exposed to sunlight and operates in two modes: global scanning the entire genome, and transcription coupled prioritizing actively used genes. Okay, mismatch repair, MMR, corrects errors from DNA replication like base mismatches. In other words, a paired with C instead of T, or small loops from insertions, deletions. Process the proteins like MUTs identifies the mismatch MUT-H, nicks the newly synthesized strand, distinguished by lack of methylation in bacteria or similar markers in eukaryotes. An exonuclease removes the erroneous section, and polymerase ligase restores it. This pathway ensures high fidelity during cell division. Okay, number four, double strand break repair. So even a double strand break repair addresses severe damage where both DNA strands are broken, such as from ionizing radiation or certain chemicals. Two main sub-pathways. Homologous recombination, HR, uses a sister chromatid identical DNA copy. There we go. There we go with the identical DNA copy. So it's a homologous recombination, uses a sister chromatid identical DNA copy as a template for precise repair. Now, how in the world is that supposed to, are mistakes supposed to have foresight to make all these processes? Proteins like RAD51 facilitate strand invasion and copying. Non-homologous end joining, NEHEJ, directly ligates broken ends without a template, which is faster but can introduce small errors. Involves proteins like KU and DNA PK. HR is more accurate but limited to phases when sister chromatids are available. After replication, NEHJ functions throughout the cell cycle. Other pathways. Translesion synthesis allows replication to bypass unrepaired lesions using specialized polymerase that inserts bases opposite damaged sites, though this can be error-prone. Fanconi anemia pathways repairs interstrand crosslinks where strands are covalently linked, involving multiple proteins to uncoil, excise, and rebuild. Efficiency and regulation. DNA repair systems are highly efficient, correcting over 99% of lesions before they become fixed changes. Sensors like ATM and ATR kinase detect damage and trigger a DNA damage response. Now, this stuff is really, really awesome. It's really amazing. And we know that mistakes cannot cause this level of function. Mistakes can only damage and make it useless, which happens, which can pause cell division, okay, via checkpoints to allow time or fixes, or if damage is overwhelming, initiate programmed cell death apoptosis to prevent propagation of errors. Now, isn't this amazing? Like, how in the world are mistakes going to have this kind of foresight? The frequency of repair correlates with damage rates. Cells handle tens of thousands of events daily, with processes completing in minutes to hours. Factors like age, nutrition, or genetic defects, e.g., mutations in repair genes, leading to conditions like scleroderma, pigmentosum, where NER is impaired, can reduce efficiency. Exoderma, or scleroderma, I would say scleroderma, anyway, can reduce efficiency, increasing susceptibility to issues. In summary, DNA repair is a fundamental cellular function that maintains genomic stability through precise enzyme-driven mechanisms tailored to specific damage types. Now, this stuff is off, but there is literally a repair mechanism that untangles DNA by cutting and resplicing the DNA strand. So I say you simply have no clue. So I included this last statement here. So this guy, whoever he is, smart guy, but just totally misinformed, miseducated, lied to. And so he thinks that I got issues when we know who's got the issue. And we know what the reality is. We know what the actual history is. Because all you got to do is, it's all written down. It's all recorded history, and we got genetic evidence backing everything up. So all you got to do is look at the evidence, follow the evidence wherever it leads. In every case, you can't make up imaginary dates, imaginary occurrences, imaginary this, that, or the other thing. So let me see what we got back here. All right, we got adopted cats. There we go, adopted cats. How are you doing? Greetings. And we have, let me see. Y-DNA CLA2 or C1A2 has found, amongst other specified Y-DNA groups during the Roman period, who was also the carriers of Hebrew tribes, amongst other specific groups. This question, because C is Mongolian. Well, C happens to be Assyrian as well, because Assyrians, the ruling class of Assyrians, were the descendants of Nimrod. They're Cushites, descendants of Cush. And they were the ruling class. Nimrod was the king of the world, and his descendants ruled after Nimrod. So all the pictures of the guys with neat beards and curly hair and holding lions and everything, those are all the descendants of Nimrod. And they moved into Europe. Assyria moved all the way into Europe. And that's why the C haplogroup is in Europe early on. That's a very well established fact. Very well established. So, because Assyria, the ruling class of Assyria has the C haplogroup. Okay, so we got Pekinen Cave, Koloklik. A notable find is C1A2 was identified in an individual from the Pekinen Cave in Upper Galilee. Yes, they were absolutely in the area. Absolutely there. Yeah. Of course, they're not there so much today, but they were there originally. And that goes for the Arameans, the Lydians, the Canaanites, everybody was pushed out. Even the G haplogroup of Assyrians it's there, but it's minimal in the area of the Levant area or even the Mesopotamian area. Okay, we got dating approximately 6,600 years ago, roughly 4,500 BC. This individual belonged to a population of Levantines during the Chalcolithic period. Yeah, I'm not sure about the date, but yeah, that's that goes back a ways. And the I haplogroup goes back a way too, which a lot of people don't realize. The I haplogroup is, they call it Germanic. It's not Germanic. It's Semitic. Ironically enough, the so-called Germanic haplogroup is Semitic, because it branches off from the J. The J begins its lineage first, and the I branches off from J way back when Jacob, of course, was living. Jacob being the founder of Israel, or the progenitor of all Israel. So, that's very interesting. There are some Jewish populations who described to be converts to Judaism early in the periods. Well, that's true with the Medes. Some of the Medes became Jews. It's recorded in the book of Esther. Some of the Medes became Jews, and it turns out that their Q haplogroup is about 5% in Jewish populations today because they became Jews. So, of course, their descendants are, they're Jewish because, they have the autosomal DNA of the Jews. But, of course, you can replace, I was trying to explain to somebody, some other guy, or maybe it's this guy I was trying to explain, you can replace all of the autosomal DNA, but it's going to maintain the Y chromosome, the original Y chromosome lineage, because the Y chromosome doesn't mix with any other DNA. It remains, it's passed down from father to son intact with slight mutations, which happen to identify the lineage all the way down and all the way back up. It's non-recombinant DNA. It doesn't mix with any other DNA. So you can replace the entire autosomal genome, which is possible, because after a certain amount of generations, you're going to lose the DNA from about, certain number of generations. I don't know, 8, 8 or so generations back, or even less, 6 or 7 or 8 generations back, you're not going to have any more DNA from those people. Your DNA comes from the more recent contributors. You know, your grandfathers, great grandfather, and such. But you go back much farther, you're not going to have any other autosomal DNA. You're going to have only the autosomal DNA. So you could move into a region and completely wipe out and erase all your autosomal DNA and have it replaced with other DNA, you know, which happens all the time. So, but you'll maintain the Y chromosome because it doesn't mix. So regardless, even if all your autosomal DNA is wiped out, which is probably in most cases or many cases, unless your generations were always in the Middle East or always in a location, you know, you'll basically have the same DNA autosomally as everybody else in the area. But the Y lineage does not mix, does not change. So in other words, my Y chromosome was given to me, or I got my Y chromosome straight from Jacob, you know, because of the tribe of Dan. So one of the sons of Jacob was Dan. Dan went off into the Mediterranean, went off into Europe early on, very early on. You know, so much early on that they say that they were basically there first. And somehow, whether it's with the Danites and or the Assyrians, which also had Semitic mitochondrial DNA, 95% of Europe or Europeans have a Semitic non-recombinant mitochondrial lineage from their mother. 95%. That, you know, of all Europeans, Western Europeans. Now, if you get Eastern Europeans, they'll probably have more Eurasian mitochondrial DNA. But if you're in Western Europe, you probably have an H or something like that, which is Semitic mitochondrial DNA, which explains the appearance of Europeans as opposed to Asians, because we're both Eurasians. I mean, I'm not originally, but my ancestors have been in Europe, so basically my autosomal DNA is Eurasian, and that comes from Gomer mostly, and maybe a little bit of Madai. The Medes were up in Europe too. The Assyrians were in Europe too, and you know, hence the Semitic mitochondrial DNA in Europe, which makes Europeans look different from Asians, but both have basically the same bone structure and stuff, you know, things like that. Because we're Eurasians. In Europe, we're Eurasians. Okay, here we go. R1A and R1B was a periods of population during the books of Esther, the Indo-Aryans. Yes, that's true. Both, yeah. So, in other words, in the book of Esther, they probably got some R1A and R1B. And when the Ashkenazi Jews, before they were Ashkenazis, went to the land of Ashkenaz, they may have acquired a little bit more R1A, but they probably already had R1A and R1B when the Jews went down the Rhine River up into Germany. But they recognized where they were. They understood where they were. They were in the land of Ashkenaz, so they call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. Like R1A, Ashkenaz, R1B, Ripfath, R2, Togarma. The R2 is mostly stayed in India. It's really, really amazing. Really amazing. Okay, E1B1B was African, who was 1/3 of the populations, while Hebrew was in Mount Sinai. Those who are E1B1B were descendants of converts to Judaism, while Hebrew was in Sinai, who came out of the Red Sea. Of course, if that's the V13, like Einstein, of course, that's part of the Jewish ancestry, is the E haplogroup, mostly the V13, which is the European branch of Mitzrayim, or descendant of Mitzrayim. So that's a part of the Jewish population as well, which accounts for a significant amount of autosomal DNA as well. So you have not only the R1A, the R1B, the E, V13 or whatever, but you also have the Q of the Medes. You have sometimes the T, not always, but sometimes you have the T of Javan, mostly probably of Tarshish, where Jonah was headed for. Oh, what are we doing here? Come on, give me a break. Okay. Can you do mtDNA for four mothers of Jews? Yeah, see, I need to know. I need to be able to identify Rebecca and them, but I need to study more of the genealogy, how they're related. I gotta see if I can get the information from Grok and put it together. But yeah, I do need to do the mitochondrial lineages a little bit more thorough. But yeah, that would be interesting as well. And as you may or may not know, there was a Jewish woman who was allegedly the wife or one of the wives of Zeus. That's, they call it mythological, but it could be that a lot of the mitochondrial DNA of Judeans and Israelites, went off into other places as well as the fact that the whole area of the Middle East is Semitic, would have Semitic mitochondrial DNA, which doesn't suffer as much in wars. It's the Y chromosome that suffers in conflicts. The mitochondrial lineages survive where many times where the Y chromosome does not survive, for obvious reasons, because you go to battle, it's the Y chromosome that suffers, not the mitochondrial DNA. So the B haplogroup, which is a Semitic mitochondrial lineage from the Middle East, is found all the way through the Pacific, very, very strong in Pacific Islanders and Polynesians. And it goes all the way to America without any Y chromosome from the Pacific or from Asia or from anywhere. But the B mitochondrial lineage goes all the way to South America and is a significant part of South Americans, very, very likely accounting for some of the South American features of the South American Indians and North American Indians. The B mitochondrial lineage. So the mitochondrial lineage tends to survive in the areas, even so it survived in Mesopotamia, survived wherever it went, and spread into Europe, all the way into Europe, without suffering, you know. And the Eurasian mitochondrial DNA pretty much stayed in Asia. And, there's only like maybe 3 or 4% of Eurasian mitochondrial lineage in Europe, and there is some African mitochondrial lineage in Europe too, but it's a small amount, even smaller amount than the Eurasian mitochondrial lineage. So, it's DNA does not lie. DNA does not lie, especially the non-recombinant DNA of the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA passed down from mother to daughter. Of course, the Y chromosome is passed down from father to son. So we have the colon model haplotype passed down from Aaron. All the sons of Aaron were required to tell their sons that they're descended from Aaron in order to preserve the lineage of the priesthood, the Kohanim of Israel. It's the only lineage that has such a tradition as sharing the fact that you're descended from Aaron or a certain particular lineage. There's no other lineage that can make that claim. But the colon model haplotype is J1, but it's specifically JZS222. And that marker of the colon model haplotype identifies not only the lineage of Aaron, but of course the tribe of Levi, Isaac, or Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, Eber, and Arpachshad. So, it's the only lineage that you can absolutely verify 100% as being that specific lineage, which is the lineage of Arpachshad, which is the IJ lineage, which includes me by way of the I that splits off from J. Because the I doesn't split off by itself, it splits from J. Because Dan is a son of Jacob. But it's so far removed. Whenever it's so far removed, it gets another haplogroup. That's the same with the C haplogroup. Is so far removed from Kush in Africa that it gets its own designation, C designation, haplogroup by itself, even though it branches off from Kush. Same thing with the M and the S in Papua New Guinea. It's really the K lineage, but they branch off so far back, both of them, the M and the S, even from each other. They're separate from each other as well. But they both branch off from Tubal, which is K. And the only lineage in the area of the M and the S is the K. K is also in Australia and South Asia. So the K is right there. Obviously, the M and the S are the same lineage as K because they branch off. The genetic distance of the Simmons Genome Project shows they branch off from K. And of course, not to be confused with the whole group of K, because, the out of Africa likes to say this descended from this and produced this and produced that. So they have K, which is Tubal, and they say that K or Tubal produced everything else, but it wasn't Tubal that produced K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, and T. It was, of course, Japheth who produced K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, and T. But the M and the S, they branch off from K in Papua New Guinea, where the K is in South Asia. So, stuff fits together. And then the D haplogroup's amazing. The Y haplogroup is the descendants of Canaan. They do have, there are findings of D in the Levant area, I think in Syria and maybe Ceylon, I don't know, depending on how the AI feels. There is D found in the Levant area, and it's an older lineage. It's an older lineage than the D in Asia, which of course makes a lot of sense, right? So with a Y full testing, they found a D lineage in the Levant area in Syria today, alive today, that is an older lineage than the lineages in Asia, which would be Japan, China, Tibet, and Altai Mountains, Mongolia area. It's amazing. Amazing. So, I mean, this is all so fascinating. I don't know, it's an amazing study, and it's too bad that people are slow to catch on to it, to realize that it's all real. You can identify who you're descended by your Y chromosome and the mitochondrial, except that I haven't figured out who's who in the mitochondrial lineages yet, because it's harder to trace the mitochondrial lineages because a lot of the females or wives aren't named in history as much as the Y chromosome progenitors. See, the D000Y DNA, D2, found in southern Nigeria with Bantu populations in Africa, which is to be expected since the Canaanites are in the area. Southern Nigeria, Bantu populations, that would be with the Cushites. The Cushites and the Putites, or the descendants of Put. But I think the Bantu, well, I know they got the B. They might have the A too, I think. But yeah, and the Canaanite lineage is found in their population as well. So because of their proximity to the Levant, Canaan, the Levant area, well, Canaan. Canaanites came from Canaan, but that's why it's named Canaan. And the Arameans came from, well, actually, they didn't really have a place called Aramea, but the Arameans controlled the trade routes all the way to India. In so doing, Aramean became the lingua franca, the spoken language. So the surviving Arameans are not so much in the Levant area as they are in India. Same thing with the Lydians. The Lydians also had trade all the way to India, and they're probably surviving because of the trade all the way to India, or the Silk Road, all the way to Silk Road. As a matter of fact, the Uyghurs are Judaic. They have the J2 lineage. The Uyghurs in China have the J2 haplogroup. So they're descended from Judah. They're Jews that went along the Silk Road, and there they are, found in China. So that's amazing in and of itself. But there's so many amazing things. When you put them all together, it's like you cannot deny the fact that you can identify the haplogroups. Cannot deny it. I have a question for you. Are the East Indians closely related to Jews? Why some Jews looks Indians, but they do not have Indian bloodlines? Some of them will probably have the J2, considering it's all the way into China. But it's also autosomal DNA as well. So that the Indians look Eurasian, it's just that they're darker. And it's interesting, you can almost split India in half. On the western side, there's more Semitic mitochondrial DNA. On the eastern side, there's more Eurasian mitochondrial DNA. In other words, the daughters of Japheth. So you have the daughters of Japheth on the east side and the daughters of Shem on the west side in India. It's almost split down the middle like that. So, you're going to get autosomal DNA from both the father and the mother. So, East Indians closely related to Jews. Well, the thing is, there are Jewish populations in East India. All the way in East India, there are Jewish populations too. As a matter of fact, some of them are returned to Israel. Some of them were never had any persecution. They've been there for thousands of years and nobody ever bothered them because they're so far in the mountains or whatever, so far away from, humanity or whatever. Okay. Some Jews look Indians, but they do not have Indian bloodlines. Well, they would have, obviously the ones in India would have some Indian bloodlines. And of course, the environment would have the environments of the Indian people as well as the autosomal DNA. So they'd have the adaptations to the environment as well as the autosomal DNA, which tends to make Indians slightly darker than Eurasians. I mean, Western Europeans. But it's, it's all there. And with the recent events in Iran, I've been noticing how the people of Iran, especially in the ancient petroglyphs, have the appearance of the descendants of Nimrod. Ancient Persia. They got the curly hair, curly beards, and everything. The same as in Sumeria. Only in Sumeria they got it like manicured. Their beards are like manicured or whatever. And they got a little tiny ponytail in the back of their head. They got their hair pulled back and a little tiny ponytail. This is in Sumeria, the Sumerian kings. So the ruling class, and that's why they all basically look similar to each other. Hello, Dana. How are you doing? Greetings. So the ruling class of the Sumerians and the ruling class of the Persians, to me, is kind of obvious, considering that the C haplogroup today is more to the east. To me, it's kind of obvious because, the only Hamitic lineages in the area are the descendants of Cush. Descendants of Nimrod, which are the descendants of Cush as well. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. I didn't know that the Persians had the same kind of curly hair as the Sumerians, and very, very similar pictographs too. Very similar looking pictographs. Okay, J2A M410 Y-DNA found amongst Pakistani Muslims, but it does not mean they are Jewish descendants, though. Well, J2 is mostly Judaic. I don't know if there are lineages like the M410. I got to study that a little bit better too. But the M410 is a different lineage from the M172. The M172 is definitely Judaic, but I don't know if the 410 is an offshoot. 410 is an offshoot of M172. Let me see if I can ask Grok here. Let me see. Or this, I'll just ask the regular chat GPTs. Let me see. Probably won't understand. Have to type it in. Is M410 a subbranch of M170. No, 172. I'm 170. This is M172. Okay, we got. No, why doesn't answer? Okay. M172 is subdivided into two complementary subgroups, which is M410, defined by M410 genetic marker. So, yes, M410 is a subbranch of M172. So, probably descendant of House of David, I'm guessing. Probably of the House of David. Of course, not everybody who's descended from King David is going to know it. You know, it's like I was a descendant of Jacob, but didn't know I was a descendant of Jacob until I studied it. And then I said, oh, I'm a descendant of Jacob by way of Dan. But yeah, that's M410 is probably, it's a sub-branch of M172, which is the main group, Judaic group, which is likely the descendants of David and Solomon, but, you know, may or may not be so, but that's what I was thinking. But definitely of Judah. Definitely Jews. Let's see. My father is J. What does that mean? Make me. It means you're a descendant of probably Judah, at least, depending on which subgroup it is, but probably Judah. Unless J1. J1 can be Arabic if it's J1, but it can be Judah. It can be Israelite too. Because, of course, they're both descended from Abraham. Specific J2A M410 branches identified in Jewish genetic studies include J2A PF 5050 and J2A CTS 7683. So, yeah. But a lot of descendants of Judah are not going to know they're descended from Judah, obviously. But definitely, J is definitely probably most likely descended from Abraham. This one here is the Cohen modal haplotype. This is JZS222 is the Cohen modal haplotype identifying haplogroup or haplotype. So if you have the JS, which there are people, famous people who have the JS222, they are definitely, probably, most likely descended from Aaron. Okay, Judah was the son of Leah and Jacob. Yeah, probably. Well, Dan is a descendant of one of the handmaids of Leah, Bilhah. So I guess that might explain, what happened to Dan or something. I don't know. But yeah, I think my lineage is from Jacob and Bilhah, which is Leah's handmaid. So, yeah. Yeah. This is, I wouldn't mind. Now that I discovered the main haplogroups, I wouldn't mind if other people picked it up and, discovered more on down the line. I wouldn't mind if somebody took over and discovered a whole bunch more stuff. But Dan is Bilhah and Jacob. Yep. Yeah, to me, it's fascinating. And Bilhah, was Rachel's maid. Oh, okay. Well, that's right. What am I thinking? Yeah. All right. Yep. I think it's fascinating, amazing. But that's about it. I'm going to have to start getting ready for work, I guess, in a little bit. My younger brother's wife, mtDNA, was T2B4K. Now, T, is that an ancient lineage of N? Does that branch off of N? I think it branches off from N, which is a subgroup of, R. I think T might branch off from R, which is a subgroup of N. Which is, that would be Judaic, basically. Originally. Because like I said, the mitochondrial lineage doesn't suffer. The mitochondrial lineage spreads everywhere. It just goes everywhere. It's not inhibited by wars and stuff like that. At least not nearly as much. Okay. Gad and Asher, Zilpah and Jacob. Yeah, Zilpah. Jacob. Zilpah was Leah's maid. Okay, there you go. Yeah, all these details are that we kind of ignored are very important all of a sudden, especially when they're your ancestors. And that's another thing. That's another reason why Jewish people can identify with the Bible, is because it's their ancestors that are being spoken of. And, sure, a lot of things bad happened to them and stuff. But I compare the history of the kings of Israel similar to the history of the church. The history of the kings of Israel is not a pretty sight. Neither is the history of the church a pretty sight. T2B4K is not Jewish. T2E is Jewish. Well, yeah, but if it's T, it goes back to the common ancestor of T. They're both T2B, T2E. They both have a common ancestor somewhere, which not too distant common ancestor. Excuse my mistakes in spelling. English not my native language. There we go. No problem. Not a problem. I speak Portuguese, but I'm not as fluent, you might say, as a Brazilian speaking Portuguese, especially with spelling. So I have to use spell check. I have to use spell check for the spelling. Okay, well, yeah, it's been great, this live stream, and but I gotta start getting ready, maybe to go to work, maybe. That's my retirement. In retirement, you can work, you don't have to work or whatever. All right, so God bless everybody and take care. And shalom. Have a great Wednesday and everything. And depending on what side of the world you're on. Everybody take care.